it's hard for me to really latch on one specific lesson that I have gained. But I do believe that everybody ultimately wants to be heard.
Hello and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. On the show, I interview peak performing innovators in the creative, social impact, and earth conservation spaces who are working to change the world. This episode is brought to you by Brain FM. Brain FM combines the best of music and neuroscience to help you relax, focus, meditate, and even sleep. I love it and have been using it to write, create, and do some of my deepest work. Because you're a listener of the show, you can get a free trial. Head over to brain.fm/innovative mindset to check it out. If you decide to subscribe, you can get 20% off with the coupon code Innovative Mindset, all one word. And now, let's get to the show. Hey there, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg. I'm your host, and I'm super thrilled that you're here. I'm also really excited and thrilled to talk about and meet this week's guest. Listen to this. Evan Stern was born during the driving rainstorm that inspired Stevie Ray Vaughan to record the classic Texas Flood. I love that. Evan Stern is one of a proud few who can claim Austin as his legitimate hometown. The town is growing. So, wow, that's amazing how few people probably are from there. Having caught the performing bug early on, he first gained attention at age 11 with a second place finish in Austin's famed O. Henry Punoff, and has since graced the stages of New York's Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center. A graduate of Sarah Lawrence College and the British American Drama Academy, wow. Whether acting Shakespeare or charming audiences with the turn of a Cole Porter phrase, Evan is first and foremost a storyteller. And you know how close that is to my heart. He's got a sincere love and appreciation for history, travel, and the art of raconteurship. He's now honored to return to Texas for the first season of Vanishing Postcards, an ambitious project that represents a synthesis of these passions through the form of audio essay. Vanishing Postcards is a documentary travelogue in which listeners are invited on a road trip exploring the hidden dives, traditions, and frequently threatened histories that can be discovered by exiting the interstates. Named one of the best podcasts of 2021 by Digital Trends, Evan is here to talk about Vanishing Postcards and everything else so amazing that he's doing. Evan, thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor.
Oh, you're very sweet. So this is such an exciting thing, delving into the history of Texas, first of all, into the storytellers of Texas, into the dives and the honky tonks of Texas as a travel log, but as a podcast. What inspired you to do this? What inspired you to go, you know what, I'm going to create this travel log and I'm going to make it about my home state? What happened that you went, yes, I want to do this?
Well, it wasn't as if there was a lightning bolt of inspiration. It was a very kind of slow, gradual process.
Mm-hmm.
Had you told me, a few years ago that right now I'd be working on a podcast, I might have said, really? But like so many, though, I am one of those people who over the last 10 years just absolutely fell in love with podcasting and the audio medium of storytelling. I think kind of the gateway drug for me was years ago. I started listening to The Moth, just people getting up and telling personal stories without notes. I just absolutely loved it. Then you start discovering other programs, like the Kitchen Sisters, and there's different stuff. I mean, there's a wonderful podcast about classic Hollywood called You Must Remember This. There's one about country music called Cocaine and Rhinestones, and not too long ago as well. The YouTube algorithm kept suggesting, for whatever reason, that I watch these travel vlog videos. And in watching them, I would never really see the way that I enjoy traveling represented. I mean, certainly it's not always the case, but I think more often than not, when you see videos of that nature, it's much less about the places themselves. It's much more about the people saying, oh, look at me and how cute I am in this place. And I just kind of gradually started thinking, I wonder if there is something that I can do. And initially, I had this grand idea that I wanted to do a show that was going to be a musical travelogue of Mexico. I'm immersed in the gig economy in New York,
Mm,
and I always try my best to get away January, February, just to escape the bitter cold of the winter. And Mexico is my happy place. It's cheap, it's warm, and so I initially had this idea that I was going to go uh, kind of use music as a portal to exploring the cultural regional history of Mexico. I was going to go to Veracruz. I was going to explore the tradition of, callejoneadas in Guanajuato and, corridos in Monterrey in the north. And I went so far as to produce a pilot episode in Merida, Yucatan, about the tradition of the trovas that they have there. And it's one thing to, when you're writing in a vacuum, you're thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, this is just going to be the best thing ever. This is going to be amazing. And then you sit down and you listen to what you have spent months working on, and you go, oh my goodness, I have missed the mark so terribly. It was a perfect lesson in show, don't tell. I mean, what happened was I talked all about the city of Merida. I talked about its history, this, that, and the other, but you didn't actually feel it
mm,
when you were listening to it. And I also learned pretty quickly that the human voice has such terrific color, shade, and nuance to it that if you have an actor come in to dub over, what was said in English, you just lose so much.
mm,
And I realized pretty quickly that I needed to learn much more about audio production before tackling a project of that ambitious nature.
mm,
And so I started thinking to myself, well, you know what? Might not be as exotic as Mexico, but if there's one thing I know, it's that Texas people love to talk and they tell great stories.
mm,
So in January of 2020, grabbed some equipment, and I went back down to Texas to see what I could do. Really, it was just going to be kind of an experiment. But it very quickly evolved into Vanishing Postcards. What happened was I took a look at what I was doing, and I realized that each episode was a snapshot of a different place. And if there was a thing that the places had in common, it's that you didn't know how much longer a lot of them were going to be around, or that they were representative of broader cultural histories or traditions that you just that are kind of rare in this kind of fast-paced, rapidly homogenizing world. And since then, it became it's been an incredibly rewarding journey. As I maybe referenced earlier, in many ways, it is kind of a 180 from a lot of the work I've previously done. At the same time, I feel that all of that work really kind of beautifully prepared me for it. And having embarked on this journey, I ended up covering like about 1,500 miles of Texas. And having embarked on this journey as a solo traveler, I'm now really grateful that the series is out in the world, and I can invite people like you and listeners really around the world to join me now and experience everything that I got to do.
wow, that's amazing. And it's incredible to me what you just said about how you took everything that you had learned up until that point and reframed it and repurposed it almost into this way of looking at your home state. And yet it is both technical and it takes a lot of artistry. And I'm wondering what in as part of doing this project, what did you learn? What was the thing that stood out for you that you learned maybe about yourself or about the people in your state or about the places? What was the biggest thing you learned and how did it change you?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, it's hard for me to really latch on one specific lesson that I have gained. But I do believe that everybody ultimately wants to be heard.
Mm,
They really do. And I mean, people often ask me, when I first started doing this, it was in January 2020. It was before the pandemic hit. Obviously, the pandemic changed a lot of what I could do. But I was really, the first episodes that you'll hear in the series, I was really just kind of showing up at these places completely unannounced. They really had no idea that I was going to be there. And people ask me, did you meet resistance? Well, really, no. Everyone was intrigued, and for the most part, people were so honored that someone like me was taking an interest in their work, their place, what they were doing, and I don't think too. I mean, someone recently asked me too that when they listen to the series, they feel as if I'm able to extract these stories, and they said, well, how do you make this magic happen? And well, the truth is that you can't. There is nothing that you can do to you never really know what is going to happen. But the stories, if you start talking to people, you approach them with respect, empathy, and a willingness to listen, and you ask them specific questions, you never know what you're going to get. And something that I tell anyone who's maybe interested in doing something like this, I will say that if you do want to get stories, you do want to ask people specific questions. I would never go up to someone and just say, tell me about yourself. I might say, before we get started, could you maybe describe for me your childhood home? Something like that. And that really kind of opens up the door, and we just kind of take things from there.
Sorry, I'm taking all of that in. I like to take a pause to make sure that I've understood everything. One of the things that I heard you say that really struck a chord with me was that it's about listening. And the other thing, of course, was asking those specific questions. And were there any, and if so, what are they, techniques that you use specifically as a performer to help you with that part of it?
Well, honestly, I think that, as I said, so much of my experience prepared me in leading up to this. And a big job that I've had for a number of years here in the city is it's a very strange job. I work as what is called a standardized patient. That is, the medical schools programs hire actors to facilitate simulations for medical interns and students.
Mm.
I have played all sorts of different cases you'd never believe. I mean, they've had to diagnose me. I've been the graphic designer. They've had to diagnose with cancer. I have, I've been the 19-year-old crack addict who suffered a panic attack. You name it, I've had it.
Uh-huh.
But I have learned so much in working with these students in terms of how they build rapport and what works and what doesn't. I think it's amazing how many people it can be applied to interview situations, whatever. You give someone a microphone, sometimes they just kind of become a completely different person. They think that every question, has to be probing, and every question, has to have weight. But you really just have to remember how you talk to people in your everyday life. How do you introduce yourself to a stranger? You're just going to start talking to people, and you read their body language, and you really just it's about establishing trust. And I feel that people understand that. I don't think of myself as a journalist. I'll be the first to say that. I think of myself as more of an essayist. I really think that a journalist's job is to investigate. A journalist's job is to probe. I'm not really there to do that. I'm really there just to, kind of have a conversation and enjoy the ride and see where that ride takes. I'm not, if someone tells me a tall tale, I'm not going to fact check that story. But I think that people recognize that. And I just think that just really, like I said, just remembering how we relate to one another uh, every day is just crucial.
Yeah, you're talking. I mean, as you're talking, I'm going, he's talking about integrity and authenticity, and those words are bandied about a lot nowadays, but it seems to me that that's what you that's what you were using who you were authentically to meet these people. And I know you said that people asked you if you met resistance. I'm wondering, what was the most wild story you heard?
Oh goodness. Oh man, there were there was a so there's this teeny town called Castell, Texas, that sits on the western edge of the hill country. It's absolutely beautiful, very isolated. The town has a population of 6.
Wow.
And I don't even know if he's really their mayor. I don't know if they actually have a mayor, but the big local personality is Randy LaFesti. He's the owner of the Castell store. I'll be releasing his episode in a few weeks. But when I was there, he told me that he had he took a trip to Cabo San Lucas with his girlfriend. They saw this chicken in a bar, and he said, "You know what? I need a chicken for the store." So he bought this rooster for the store, and he had this Billy Bass that was like one of those electronic things. You clap your hands and the bass wiggles. Well, one day, as he tells me, he looks over and this rooster is having sexual relations with that bass.
Oh my.
So this thing, he tells me, became this huge sensation where people from all over the place started coming to town to see his rooster perform, 12 times a day. And he was able to make hundreds of thousands of dollars in real estate deals that he was able to sell to the people who came through the store because of that rooster. And then he proudly led me into the store where he showed me this. He called the rooster Cockaroo, and the rooster died. And after the rooster died, he took him to the taxidermist and had him mounted and placed on top of his good friend Billy the Bass. And I've seen a lot of taxidermy in my day. I don't think I have ever seen a stuffed rooster, and I have certainly never seen a stuffed rooster on top of a Billy Bass. I'll tell you that right now.
Wow. That is a tall tale for sure. Oh my goodness. I wow. Yeah, yeah. I don't even, I'm like, what? How do I follow that up? I think I don't. Uh
Well, you asked, so there you go.
no, I did. I did. Because the thing about this is that anytime we tell stories or listen to stories, I think we're changed by them. Even if it's, oh, that's just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Your experience of life is changed in some way or another. So I guess I'm wondering, how have you been changed by doing this project?
Well, it's in many ways it's been a dive into the unknown. As I said, it's very it was all very new for me in the beginning. I had to do a lot of learning, and I really had to put myself out there. It definitely tested the boundaries of my comfort in a lot of ways.
Mm.
You really just have to, as I said earlier, you have to go out there and just start talking to people. And I usually found that I was way more nervous than the people I was talking to.
Mm.
And I was talking to someone else about this experience, and someone said, and she asked me, she's like, well, how do you, where does that confidence come from? Where do you get that confidence? And I said, well, you know what? I think I've discovered that confidence is kind of overrated,
Hmm.
because you can't just read a book or attend a 3-day workshop, whatever, and magically have confidence. It just doesn't happen that way. Confidence happens as a result of experience, It happens as a result of mistakes. I think I heard somewhere that, what heroic act doesn't involve just huge levels of vulnerability.
Mm.
And so I think I have definitely grown in confidence as a result of all of this, but that really just is a byproduct of the work itself and everything that has been asked of me to rise to this challenge.
And that in itself, the skills you've built, the ideas that you've gotten and brought to fruition is a big part of the change, I would imagine. And I'd love to discuss a little bit as you talk about this. What is the process? What was the creative process that goes in to making an episode, to crafting Vanishing Postcards?
Absolutely. So obviously I do have each episode does have a subject that I am interested in delving into. There are people that I want to meet. That just so you know, so basically, a bit more about the show itself for those listening out there. So essentially, listeners are invited to join me on a road trip, and so each episode it's produced in documentary style. So you're going to hear a lot of it's not interview. It's not talk show. You're going to hear a lot of different voices. You're going to hear some of my narration, and I really work hard to make it an immersive listening experience for those who are hearing the episodes. But basically, the way that I construct it is there are, as I said, each episode there are certain issues that I'm looking at, and so I just go. I talk to people, and I assemble a number of interviews at the places that I go to. I try to talk to the owners. I try to talk to the workers. I try to talk to the people who go to these places. You're going to ask all of those people different questions, but you're also, I think you also want to. There are also some specific questions that I will ask all of them. And then what I do is I come back home and I listen to all of the I listen to uh, all of the interviews and I extract the gold from each person I speak with. I could very well talk to someone for like an hour. Out of that hour conversation, I might just take 3 minutes worth of nuggets or whatnot. And then I look at everything that I have, and I step back and I just kind of look for, that what what are the commonalities? What do people keep coming back to? Are there opposing views? And from there, I just kind of take these nuggets and I weave together a story out of all of that. I really let my subjects kind of guide the way that the story moves and goes. The most challenging job for me is in the writing process of pasting it all together. Everything has to have. I learned, for years. I've did a lot of performing in the cabaret world, and even if you're just putting together a show that's really kind of a series of songs, what is said in between those songs is every bit as important as the songs themselves, and everything has to have architecture and a beginning, middle, and an end. So the greatest challenge for me is about how I can link everything together in the narration as part of a cohesive whole. I think, but each episode, I never totally. There are always things that I want to focus on, but you just never totally know where it's going to go. And before each one, I always ask, my God, is this going to work? But so far it's worked out okay.
That moment of, oh, what if this is going to be a complete disaster? I know it well.
Totally.
And I'm so fascinated by what you're saying with respect to the storytelling, the beginning, middle, and end, and the sort of the pattern between songs in a cabaret show, all of those things, those elements of storytelling. What do you think is the result? What is the most crucial thing to put into it, and what is the result? When do you feel like, yes, it has worked, as opposed to, it's going to be a disaster?
Well, as I said earlier, again, the most important thing is show, don't tell. And what is always best for me is I try not to I try not to express too much in the way of opinion. What is really magical though is just when you're talking to someone, and whether they realize it or not, they share and tell a story that just kind of beautifully encapsulates everything.
Mm.
That just really explains the issue without at that point the work for you is really done. But kind of an example of something that I did that was a challenge, was I have an episode that's coming out in a bit where I took a trip first to Brownsville, Texas, where I spoke with this man who is the last cook in the United States who was allowed to serve cook barbacoa as it was meant to be prepared, which means it's cooked in a pit under the ground. And that's what he does. He's serving barbacoa out of what had been his childhood home. There's a pit out back that's in the ground, and that's where he cooks it. The reason that he's allowed to do it is because his father started it in 1956, and it's been going on for this long. And so I focused on him, and I did a segment on him. And then I went to San Antonio, and I met a cook there who talked about cooking up puffy tacos. And it ended up, her story went in a completely different direction. I mean, her mother started this business out of a garage because it was her last hope. She was an incredible woman, a revered figure in San Antonio, who was shockingly murdered. And she talked all about that and everything, and then and how she found forgiveness and was able to move beyond, and everything that how her mother prepared her and how her mother expressed love through cooking. And I realized that on the surface, these two stories, yes, they were about cooking, but they were very, very different. But what is it that they had in common? I realized that through their cooking, they were both expressing love. And for me, and that's how I brought the two together.
I'm still thinking. Sorry.
It's all right.
It's beautiful. Yeah, that notion of cooking and healing through cooking and expressing love through cooking, but also expressing love for, I guess, the heritage and the inspiration for what they did is so important. And I'm wondering if you have someone or figures or people in your world who does that for you, who inspired you to do this, and if so, is it that same love? It sounds weird to say love connection, but is that connection one of love and respect? What is it about the people or the images or the ideas that inspired you that comes from that place? Oh, now you're thinking.
I know, of course, absolutely. I mean, there. I mean, who can you just rephrase the question in a simple one sentence? In a simple one sentence for me. Can you say what you're getting at again here for me?
Sure. I'm just wondering who inspired you throughout the journey. Are there any public figures? Is there anybody in Texas? Are there any
So,
people who made you go, this is what I want to do?
well, what I can say is that if there is a bar that I am always working towards, never met him personally, but I am old enough to remember growing up on CBS, there was a man by the name of Charles Kuralt
Mm-hmm.
who would travel the country, and he would really just kind of share good news
Mm-hmm.
is what he was doing. And he never expressed anything in terms of in showing these stories. He was able to present, the best of people without really expressing anything in the way of judgment. And there are many situations throughout this process where I have asked myself, what would Charles Kuralt do?
Hmm.
And I don't mean to. I'm not trying to compare myself to Charles Kuralt in the least. I have much more work to do. Before I feel like I can get. People called him the Walt Whitman of American television.
Mm.
But I can tell you that that is the bar that I am always working towards. And the greatest compliments that I have received, are when people have, heard this series and said, "Oh, you know what? This reminds me of Charles Kuralt."
That's lovely. And I remember Charles Kuralt also on like a CBS Sunday Morning or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. His stories were all, when like, you were mentioning the idea of love and heart, that's what I remember thinking about his stories was that they were always full of such quiet soul and heart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They didn't have to be huge stories, but they always left me feeling better and always gave me something to think about.
Well,
And
and yeah, go on, go on.
no, 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 go
Mhm.
ahead, go ahead.
Well, and I do believe that there is a great void of that when you look at our media landscape right now.
Hmm.
There really is. We live in a horribly polarized, horribly divided age. I do not believe that anything that we have lived through over the last 5, 6 years should be normalized. I will be the first to say that. Um, but I do believe that the issues that we are wrestling with right now as a nation, in the divisions that we're dealing with in terms of politics and race, are completely unsustainable. But at the same time, I do think that there is more that we have in common than what we realize. And I do think that culture right now is one of those rare areas of agreement. And what this show is about celebrating is that culture. Culture provides opportunity for shared experiences. And that's really kind of what I'm getting at with all of this. And additionally too, I mean, how can we expect for people in our rural communities to appreciate what is good and beautiful about places like New York City or San Francisco or even Austin for that matter, if we cannot appreciate what is good and beautiful about them?
From what you just said, it feels like there's a sort of a through the looking glass aspect to your show that you're inviting people to go on a journey with you to see these places or to listen to these stories and to hear about them. When you do that, when you're in that space of inviting people on a journey, how do you decide which stories are the ones that are important to tell?
Well, something that's important to me is that so often when we think about art and culture, I mean, we think about palaces of civilization like the Met, the British Museum, the Louvre. But the truth is that art and culture is everywhere. And oftentimes, some of the best of it comes from places that you're just not going to read about in glossy magazines. You're not going to see about these places on Instagram. And it's really about exploring that. Detroit gave us Motown, Clarksdale, Mississippi gave us the blues. And for me, it's really kind of about seeking these places out. If you read if you read like a tourist guidebook about Texas, they're going to tell you to go to the Alamo. They're going to tell you to go to the Riverwalk, do this, do that. but there's so much more to that. I mean, I had the great honor of visiting a town called San Benito, which is about 15, 18 miles north of the border. And this is, if you look at this country, the Rio Grande Valley is just statistically one of the poorer regions. There's been a lot of a depopulation, flight, whatnot. But this town of San Benito was responsible for giving birth to the movement of conjunto music, which is an incredible genre. Basically, what happened is the Mexican laborers down in South Texas heard the music that was brought to the area by the Czechs, the Germans. They heard the polkas, they heard the accordions, and they took that accordion music, they took those polkas, and they added their own lyrics in Spanish to them. They threw in guitar, and they created this whole entire genre of music. And the story there is I knew that I wanted to do a piece, on the border. You hear about the border a lot in the news right now, but what is always lost in the noise surrounding all of that is the culture and the people who actually exist there. And I thought that Conjunto really kind of provided a terrific opportunity just to explore kind of the beauty that exists there. And I heard that there was this museum in this town called the Texas Conjunto Music Hall of Fame. So I sent a message on Facebook. I'd heard that it was founded and owned by a man by the name of Ray Avila. And a little while later, I got a call from his son. Turned out that Mr. Avila, his father, had died about 7 months prior, but that if I wanted to go visit the museum, that they would be honored to have me. And I showed up there, this museum, this small town in Texas, and the entire family was there because they wanted for me to know about their father. They wanted me to know about Conjunto. They found the president of a record label who specializes in this music so that he could be there with us too. And they had such pride and joy in sharing and honor that someone took the time to visit a place like San Benito. It is an experience I will always treasure and never forget.
That is so lovely. And I'm so glad that you got to tell that to tell that story, to sort of open the window, if you will, into San Benito and into this music. And I'm wondering something. This is a little off topic, but do you know who Alan Lomax was?
I have heard the name.
Okay.
Please refresh my memory.
Well, sure, sure, sure. So he was an ethnomusicologist, and what
Mm-hmm.
he did with his whole career for 50 years, he traveled the world and he recorded music. And when video came along, video of indigenous music, wherever he was, he tried to find the music from that place.
Mm.
And there, when I worked at the National Geographic Society many moons ago, he came over and he was like, "Hey, I would love to put together a library." That didn't happen with the Geographic, but his daughter, after his death, put up a website, and there is a website that you can go and sort of see the music from anywhere. You can hear the music from anywhere. You just type it in, and if it's there, if they got a recording of it, you'll be able to hear it. And so I'm
Mm.
wondering, for posterity, what is your this library, if you will, that you're creating, this travelogue that you're creating? In my mind, Alan Lomax's version of it is providing us access to music from all over the world that could be lost.
Mm.
And I'm wondering, what is your feeling about that with the stories that you're telling? You mentioned earlier that that's their survival is not certain.
Mm.
The different traditions and even the the honky tonks, the places themselves.
Mm.
What are you going for here? What is your long-term vision for Vanishing Postcards?
Well, so yes, so I'm collecting oral history, and I think it is really important that we do have a record of it. I think in some ways, this is something perhaps of a bit of a call to arms. I want to say it's about shining a light on what is still there, what we can still go to. But as I said, some of this stuff might not be around for too much longer. So it's really kind of about drawing attention to it so that we can preserve it. I look at my hometown of Austin, Texas as a whole. It is changing at rapid pace. I don't think that change is something to be feared. In many ways, I think it is something that should be embraced, but we have to change and grow responsibly. We have to ask, what is it that people like about Austin? What is it about Texas that draws people there? Why do people keep coming? And I do think that it's culture. And I believe that we as a society need to do a lot more to protect the culture that surrounds us. I mean, most of the places that I spotlight are small businesses. And whenever a small business closes that has a great history behind it, or fondness to it, you'll have all of these people come out of the woodwork saying, oh my goodness, this is horrible, this is the worst thing ever. But my question always is, well, when was the last time you actually went there?
Mm.
I mean, it's really exhausting. It's a lot of hard work to keep these places going, and if people get tired or they aren't making ends meet, you can't blame them. And this is an issue that you see happening in New York. It's an issue you see happening in Texas, California, London, name it, it's happening. And so I do think that, hopefully this series kind of makes people think a bit more about that. And long term, it is my hope that I can expand the map beyond Texas, because the issues that I feel are explored in this series are truly universal. In fact, if you look at the analytics, most people tuning in and listening right now are actually listening from outside of Texas. And so I think it's important to, I want to expand the map. And, if I can do a part to draw attention to the beauty of American culture that surrounds us, that's kind of what my goal is.
And it's a great goal. And I'm so glad that you said that you eventually, because that was going to be my next question was, do you want to take it outside of Texas? And I mean, covering Texas can be a lifetime's work because it's such
Mm.
a big place with such a varied set of peoples and cultures. And yet I love the notion of that, what you said, finding those small businesses, finding those people who aren't the ones trumpeting themselves and giving them a chance to shine. I think that's amazing and wonderful that you're doing that. And I love the notion. And if you could go, where would you go next?
Well, I have a dream. I would love to drive Route 66 from Oklahoma to California, and I would love to collect stories and oral histories along the way. I think that Route 66, so much of why it kind of occupies this mythic status is because of the timing. There were other highways that were built before, after, there were larger ones. But I think, if you journey Route 60, I've never done it, but I have to think that if you drive Route 66, I mean, you are following in the steps of the Okies who migrated to California because of the Dust Bowl in the Great Depression. It was an incredible artery during World War II. So there's that history as well. Then it kind of, encapsulates that golden age of American travel in the late 40s and 50s. Then it was decommissioned, and there was a lot of abandonment that happened, and kind of what does that say about the American dream? Is it and so there's a lot that I would like to explore in taking that journey. Beyond that, I would also love to take a trip to Mississippi sometime. Something that fascinates me about Mississippi, I think the writer Willie Morris said that Mississippi is America's Ireland. If you look at it, it has produced the most incredible canon of just literary lions. William Faulkner, Richard Wright, Eudora Welty. They were all Mississippians, and Mississippi continues to produce incredible writers. There's a wonderful storytelling tradition attached to Mississippi, and I would love to see what I could get there.
I love it. I think that's amazing. First of all, I've driven along 66 and you will love it, love it, love it. And uh I've Mississippi and the South in general has a rich storytelling culture. Every time I spend time in Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, that part of the country, if you set a spell, you will you will get amazing stories, and often it doesn't take a lot of prompting. So I'm you said earlier that it's just about sort of talking to people the way you would talk to them. I guess the question is, have you had people who just say nope, nope, not doing it? And if so, what have you done if that particular story is important to you, or do you just move on to the next person?
Oh, absolutely. Well, there is, so the third episode that you'll hear in the series, I did at a honky tonk called Arky Blues Silver Dollar, in this town called Bandera, Texas. It's a fantastic place. Again, it was pre-pandemic, so I showed up there unannounced, and I really wanted to talk to Arky Blue. He's the owner. He's in his 80s. He performs there every Saturday night. I thought, this guy is a legend. I've got to talk to him. Got to talk to him. He wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. Wouldn't give me an inch. Refused to let me record him. And he was cordial when I talked to him. We're talking, your one word answers. You try everything. But what happened is I talked to everyone that I could find around him, and everybody had a story about Arky that they wanted to share. And what resulted in, and so his refusal became part of the story itself. But in talking to everyone who knew and loved him and had stories to share about him, you really got a terrific portrait that wouldn't have existed otherwise, that I think is entirely charming. And when that happened, I had to remind myself that one of my very, very favorite essays of all time was written by Gay Talese. In 1965, he was given an assignment to interview Frank Sinatra for Esquire magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And Frank Sinatra completely refused to talk to him. But what he ended up doing was he interviewed all the hangers on, everyone in his entourage. And to this day, people say that it is the most realistic portrait of Frank Sinatra that has ever been captured. And so I would, recommend to anyone who finds themselves in that position to think of that story and, maybe read that story, because that's something that I draw tremendous inspiration from.
It's so interesting. I have a friend who's a PR expert, and she talks about the difference between marketing and PR. Gloria Chow is her name, and she says marketing is when you come to people and you say, "Hey, I'm great," but PR is when someone else goes, "You know what? That person, they're great," and as long as it's someone you trust, it weighs more than if the
Mm.
person is trumpeting in themselves. And so there's something to what you said that kind of reminded me of that notion of the other people around Frank Sinatra or Arky uh, being the ones who tell their tale. And I guess I'm wondering, within that, I've asked you about the wildest. What is the story that has touched you the most? The one that made you go, wow, I had no idea.
Well, for me, the episode that has the most personal heart for me, is the second one. What happened is I went to this dance hall. um, I, I knew that I wanted to do a piece on dance halls. In Texas, you know, everyone always writes about Green Hall or Lukenbach. Those are the big dance halls, but there are many, many, many more others out there. And there was one I discovered that I'd never been to called Sefchick Hall. It's in this teeny community called Seaton, Texas. It's about 8 miles outside of a town called Temple. It's a community of about 40 people. And there's this old dance hall there called Sefshik Hall that is pretty much trapped in time. By most accounts, it is now the oldest family run dance hall in Texas. It's a family that owns it. This family has always owned and run it. And I went there, and I wanted to talk to its owner, Alice, who's 89 years old. I had actually called in advance to ask if I could come and talk to her. She said, sure. Well, I got there, and I said, well, I'm here to talk to Alice. And turned out, that morning she took a fall and they had to take her to the, emergency room.
Oh, wow.
And, and it kind of, you could feel the weight in that situation. What happens to this place, without Alice here? And I ended up talking to her daughter-in-law and son, and they're committed to keeping it going. But you could feel like I feel like that situation kind of infused the episode with weight. But beyond that, I listened to what I had initially, and there was something missing. I said to myself, I said, I'm doing a lot of talking here. I'd like to find someone else who could do some talking for me. And there's an association called Texas Dance Hall Preservation, and I found the woman who was working at the time as their executive director because I wanted to talk to her just to kind of get some more historic perspective on dance halls. I was talking about the history. I think it's better if someone else can talk about the history other than me that actually knows more. And I talked earlier about how you have those moments where someone just kind of tells a story or shares something that just beautifully illuminates everything. And I was talking to her and I said, there are so many causes out there in this world that are worth devoting attention to. I said, why are dance halls important to you? And she said it became an incredibly emotional interview that I was not expecting at all. But she said that those places have a lot of heart, and that her fear was that we're getting away from that as a society. And she ends up crying. She's saying, these places, people go there, it's not just about the fun, it's not just about the dancing. It's about it's about cleaning the roof, it's about cleaning the toilets. And she says, I see so many people working so hard to keep these places going. And and of course it just perfectly illustrated what the Shulock family were doing. The daughter-in-law, the son, they work 5 days. They do not take days off. They have regular jobs that they keep Monday through Friday, and then they're there on the weekends. And I think that it beautifully exemplified their story, in addition to just about every other person that I talked to in the series as a whole.
That is beautiful. And I'm so grateful that you shared that moment of talking to her, and also the story of dance halls in general, or anything that we do because we love it.
Mm,
We do it because whatever it is, whatever that thing is that you do because you love it. And particularly these places where, one of the things that I think, Evan, that you've highlighted that I think is so incredible is that you've highlighted places that aren't going out for fame. These are people and places that are just doing their thing and living their lives day in and day out, year in and year out. And they're not going to be a celebrity. They're not trying to be world famous, for example. And yet you've shown the light on them. And I think it's powerful
mm,
because of that, because they're living their lives and doing something hopefully that they love, like with the dance hall story, and they're not looking for accolades, and yet you've given them a platform.
mm-hmm.
And I'm so grateful that you've done that.
Well, I will say too, it's not even that. I think a lot of them as well feel a responsibility to the people who go to these places.
Mm-hmm.
Like a dive bar isn't just a place to grab a beer. A dive bar represents an entire community. A dive bar, a dance hall, these are all places where people go to belong. That's what all of these, that's another through line that I think these places have in common.
Mm.
Whether it's a barbecue joint, a dive bar, a dance hall, people go to these places for community and for places to belong. And I think that it's important to highlight that aspect as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I agree. And interestingly, because people come and go, like you said, there are a lot of people who come to Texas, especially Austin has ballooned. Uh, I guess the question that's uppermost in my mind right now is culturally, the culture of places changes, right? And so as the culture evolves, I know that you're a lot of what Vanishing Postcards is about is capturing that before it goes away, before it's no longer in its current form. Are there things that you've done that have been uh, sort of in the process of changing, or something is over and something new's coming to take its place? And if so, what have those things been?
You mean my work or
Yeah, yeah,
places I've been? Mhm.
like I guess I'm not asking the question very well. I'm just wondering about culturally, s- your the Vanishing Postcards project is focused on sort of the smaller, uh, very heartfelt places and people in Texas now, and perhaps hopefully someday elsewhere. And as the culture changes in those places or for those dance halls, have you captured in any of the episodes that you've done that change taking place?
Absolutely. The very first place that I went to was a bar called the Dry Creek Cafe. It's been there for about 70 years. When it first opened in the early 1950s, it really basically sat on the edge of the country. Now, not only is it no longer country, it's now pretty much surrounded by mansions.
Mm,
It's now basically it's this ramshackle, dilapidated dive that is surrounded by some of the priciest real estate in all of Texas.
hmm.
But this bar has survived, and I think it's one of the few places that you can go where you're reminded that before the tech millionaires invaded the hills were actually home to cedar choppers, which was this Appalachian subculture. And the very first person that I interviewed in in Texas for the series was Angel, their bartender. This was a tough dame, raspy voice, just chain smoker,
Hmm.
just fabulous, just tough as nails woman. She was incredibly reticent to speak with me. Getting her to talk on the record and allowing me to record her just took every ounce of charm that I could possibly muster. But when she found out that I was okay with cussing, she opened right up. She let the F bombs fly. We had a terrific time. And very sadly, I think about 4 months or so after I interviewed her, she died. What was
Oh,
remarkable about Angel is, as I said, the place opened in, I think it was 1953. She was only the third bartender to ever work there.
wow.
And so I'm incredibly grateful that I, captured her voice, and I have that record of her. But you have to ask, when someone like that goes, what does that, how does that change a place? What does that do? Um, I was actually just back in Austin last week, and I went there to visit the place to just see if there was some additional footage I could get that would help bring the season to a close, just to kind of see how that change had affected things.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are now there are now like a few bartenders there who are like trading duties and whatnot. But I think what's kind of beautiful is that those who have filled in, were all regulars who knew and loved and cared about the bar. And they dedicated a section of the bar to Angel where they have her pictures and some
Mm.
things that she loved. And it was just kind of interesting and reassuring to see how yes, when a beloved figure leaves, it's hard and it's challenging. But if the community is there, it will find a way to continue. At least for now, I'm grateful to know that the Dry Creek is still there, and that those who love it are doing their part to keep it going.
I'm so glad to hear that story. That is wonderful. Evan, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about this. It's such an important topic because it isn't one that we tend to focus on. So I'm really grateful that you took the time to tell me about Vanishing Postcards and to tell me about the culture and the people that you are uh, capturing, if you will, for all of us to enjoy. And if you're listening to this, you need to go check out Vanishing Postcards. I've listened to a few episodes and it's fabulous and amazing. Evan, if you wouldn't mind, I would love it if you would give whatever social media
Mm-hmm.
that you have, so that if people want to find you, that they can.
Absolutely. So if you search Vanishing Postcards on Instagram, you'll find it there. It also has a Facebook page. Just search Vanishing Postcards. It should turn up. You can also find me on Instagram as well. I'm at Evan Stern NYC. I thank you so much but most important, most crucially, please go find, listen to, subscribe to Vanishing Postcards. Since this is a podcast, whatever you're listening to this on, I'm quite confident that you'll find us there. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on all the, whatever platform is out there, we're more than likely on. And I'd be most honored if you'd consider giving us a listen.
Awesome. And I will actually put all of that in the show notes so that if you're listening to this and you've seen the show notes, you'll be seeing the links to all of it. People learn differently. So I like giving both the audio and the sort of, you can read it visual for it. Evan, again, I'm really grateful that you took the time to chat with me. And I have one last question, if that's okay.
Of course.
It's a question I ask everybody who comes on the show, and it's a silly question, but I find that it yields some profound results. And the question is this: if you could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
What would I say for the whole world to see? Oh my goodness. Yeah. See, I feel like I need to say something profound like Buddha or something like that now. Or Yoda. My goodness.
I've had
I
people
mean,
say eat your veggies, so it
eat
does
your
not
veg.
have to be.
Look, okay, but I mean, it is a cliche. I've heard it many times, but I do believe that there is something to be said for the fact that if I were to write this in the sky, I would say luck is the result of preparation meeting opportunity. I absolutely believe that to be true. I always do my best to be, prepared and educate myself, and and be ready so that when opportunity comes, luck can happen.
I love that. I think that's a great way to end this episode. Evan Stern, you are fabulous, and I'm so glad that you were here. Thank you. This is the Innovative Mindset Podcast. You have been listening to my wonderful conversation with Evan Stern, who is the host of the Vanishing Postcards podcast, which, of course, you need to check out. If you're liking what you're hearing, do me a favor, leave a review, let me know, comment, however you'd like to get in touch. I would appreciate it. Until next time, this is again Isolde Trachtenberg reminding you to listen, learn, laugh, and love a whole lot. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and if you like what you're hearing, please review it and rate it and let other people know. And if you'd like to be a sponsor of the show, I'd love to meet you on patreon.com/innovative mindset. I also have lots of exclusive goodies to share just with the show's supporters there. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2021. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, keep living in your innovative mindset.